Today's lecture is related to the special planning, how to designate green infrastructure, how to designate ecological network. And just few slides from yesterday's lecture. This aerial photos with bird eye view, which help to describe what is the landscape. And yesterday we discussed that there are two important aspects of landscape. We can talk about landscape components like soil, relief, vegetation, hydrological regime, which altogether is forming resource, how to use the landscape, for what purpose. And we talk about landscape elements, which are mostly related to human activities throughout of history. And those landscape elements, if they are losing their function, they are disappearing. If they're getting new function, they can continue. And on those photos, you can see the typical agricultural fields which are ameliorated. I mean, it's happened everywhere in Europe, in East Europe, in Soviet Union, that former smaller fields were merged together, and very often there was too high humidity, and drainage or ditches were established. And yesterday also we talked about protected areas. In the second part, there were maps about protected territories inside Russia according to the percentage of proportion of protected areas. And we also discussed that according to the Convention of Biodiversity, our aim by 2020 is to have 17% of protected areas. And on this map you can see countries which already fulfilling this target. Now, all those countries which are dark green, and you can see that most European countries, they already have more than 17% under the nature protection. It's still a problem for many countries in Africa, and for those countries which has larger territory.
Профессор начинает рассказывать вам о том, какие там ландшафтные элементы должны быть при создании такой.
Наверное, это самый главный вопрос, что всегда надо спросить.
Первое, каким образом ландшафт должен быть описан, каким образом ландшафты действуют, оперируют, насколько концепция ландшафта дееспособна, каким образом ландшафт может быть изменен, какие, значит, различия, отличия могут появиться в результате вот этих изменений. Тут должны ландшафты изменяться, и каким образом вы должны решения приниматься, потому должны ли должны ландшафты изменяться.
But I will continue now in English and then just proceed на русском, если что-то не... And just one wonderful photo about the cultural landscape which hasn't changed during the 1,000 years in China and in China area.
Это пример ландшафта, который не менялся в течение 1000 лет.
Это был trade road, это как по-русски? Путь между Китаем и Индией. But how today we'll talk about ecological network, green network, how to designate. And if you look at map of Europe, then you can see that large areas are transferred by human activities, and it's very strongly urbanized, and only in northern part and in mountains you still can see virgin nature, or more or less, maybe only in Finland, Sweden and Norway you can really you can see the natural ecosystem still. And if you look at the southern part of UK, or if you look at the Netherlands, then you can see that the proportion of natural areas is very, very small.
What is the difference between white and red?
Red is mostly settlements and infrastructure. They're mostly built areas. White is agricultural landscape, and green is more forest or meadows. The target of ecological network is to have a network between natural areas.
Задача зеленой сети экологической в том, чтобы связать вот эти вот зеленые территории, как красные, видите, они связаны, но зеленые.
Now there will be 3 or 4 maps which are showing protected areas according to the IUCN categories. The category 1 means that this is the strict nature reserve.
Международный союз охраны природы, организацию, которую мы слышали, очень хорошо знакомы, у нее есть классификация охраняемых территорий на категории. И вот он сейчас покажет в Европе, что с этими категориями.
Это резервуар.
Наиболее строгий режим охраны, заповедник.
And you can see these strict nature reserves, which are really poor nature in northern countries and maybe in Eastern European countries. I mean, one thing is to talk about what is the share of protected areas, but you also should look at management regime. Now, if you add landscape reserves and nature reserves, then you can see much wider spread.
Добавить резерват, заказники, видите, уже территория увеличивается.
Это категория 2 и 4. Если добавлять еще эти национальные парки и landscape reserves, then it's much more. Then this is the map of the protected areas of Europe. Now, the percentage of protected areas has increased during the last 30 years more than 3 times.
За последние 30 лет 3 раза количество охраняемых территорий увеличилось.
For example, in 1984, only 3% of territory was covered by protected areas.
3% территории покрыто охраняемыми территориями.
And if we will get the target 17% by next year, then it means that during the 35 years, practically 6 times the territory has.
То есть, если достигнет цели свои 17%, то, значит, получится, что в 6 раз увеличится.
But it's not enough. If you look at global trends of status of biodiversity in different parts of world, in different countries, different continents, then you can see that during the last 10 or 20 years, the list of species who are threatened has increased, and it will continue next 10, 20, 30 years. And if you look at Europe, then this is one of the worst situation. It still decreased more than 20%.
Ну, видите, что даже увеличение 18% особо не помогает. Недостаточно. Вы видите, что количество исчезающих видов оно увеличивается более-менее везде, особенно в Европе.
And the first is in Japan and in Korea, and average for the world is about 10%. Then even if we will do right decisions today, we could have some success maybe in 30-40 years only. And those are the major threats to the global biodiversity. And you can see that two main threats are related to destruction of habitats, destruction of natural areas, and to the habitat fragmentation. And ecological network is exactly the instrument who tries to link the natural areas together. And other reasons, it's just global climate change, it's over-exploitation of species by humans, and also invasive alien species are a very important threat. Then you can...
Видите список наиболее важных проблем для биоразнообразия. Ведь первая проблема – это нарушение, разрушение мест обитания, хабитатов. Второе – это фрагментация хабитатов, загрязнение хабитатов, глобальные климатические изменения, чрезмерная эксплуатация видов для потребления человеком и также инвазивные виды.
And if you look at different taxa, then I mean amphibians or birds or mammals, they have different reasons of decrease. We don't go in detail.
Данные по различным
Especially this factor is habitat destruction and fragmentation have very enormous impact on those groups, but just one factor. It's mammals, amphibians and birds. The first one is which one? Habitat destruction. You mean this one? It's the habitat destruction, yes. And we'll hold those for birds. For the birds, mammals, and amphibians, this habitat destruction is the major threat. And most of these built up areas, it could be barrier for several species, especially for the mammals. Then, additional to merging natural areas, we should think how to use green infrastructure, how to build ecoducts or ecotunnels to help species to overcome those barriers.
Застроенные территории, они создают такие барьеры, которые очень сильно мешают млекопитающим и наводным перемещаться. Поэтому задача стоит в том, как создать такие вот какие-то туннели, либо коридоры, которые бы связали млекопитающим и этим наводным перемещаться.
And now during the last 10 years, we're talking not anymore only about ecological network, but we're talking about green infrastructure. At the end of my lecture today, I will show what is the concept behind the green infrastructure. And additional to the natural areas, we are also including all man-made elements which are supporting biodiversity, like those ecoducts, like green roofs, like green walls, and so on and so on.
В последнее время тоже популярность приобретает концепция зеленой инфраструктуры, то есть все вот эти элементы, как природные, так и полуприродные, которые могут находиться в городах, которые как раз служат для того, чтобы эта вот связанность между природными территориями и природными компонентами существует.
And everybody can list different elements what could be barriers. Then it could be railways, highways, built-up territories, especially highways, which are fenced. Very often they are like barriers. And in many countries, if you compile land use maps, land use change, then you can see that the overall structure has simplified, and very often area of natural areas has decreased remarkably. Such kind of studies you can do, or it has done in, I think, in any countries, and I think also in your university you have several studies to look at how land use has changed during the last couple of 100 years.
Структура землепользования меняется. Здесь мы видим, что произошло за последние 100 лет. Основная тенденция идет к упрощению. Много выделов стало меньше.
And now, during the last 20-25 years, we are aiming to have European ecological network. We have had several projects where, on the basis of satellite images, we try to designate the ecological network at European level. And I think in most European countries, they have their own ecological networks. Yesterday, the professor showed the ecological map of Pskov Oblast, and you have seen eastern part of Russia, I think, and just the examples how European ecological networks look like. I will explain you about methodology later on using example from Estonia. But again, you can see that northern part and Russia still have large core areas of ecological network. Yeah.
Наверное, уже в курсе, что последние 20-25 лет активно ведется работа над созданием экологической сети европейской. Каждая страна отдельно создала свою, сейчас пытается как-то все связать. Но видите, что в России, в северной части России вообще все хорошо с экологической сетью, в других местах, конечно, плохо.
And this is just a vision or just indicative map showing where ecological network could be. It's not part of special planning where you can designate the core areas and you can put some restrictions for land use. It's just like a vision, or this is the potential for the ecological network. And if you like to implement this vision into the environmental management or special planning, then you should delineate all those core areas, the corridors, and you should add land use conditions and restrictions. Then it will be in the work. But this is just a nice vision, nice picture about the potential of ecological network.
То есть это то, что вы видите, это та картинка, как потенциальная экологическая сеть может существовать. Вот. Ну, как вы понимаете, не везде можно создать коридор или там, ядро этой экологической сети. То есть, вот, например, здесь вот более-менее видны те территории, которые, в принципе, подходят. То есть они имеют характеристики и, соответственно, они могут функционировать как коридор или ядро.
It's very important just to add, if you implement this concept in special planning, that you have the list of land use conditions and a list of restrictions, what is prohibited in this core area or what is prohibited in this corridor. This is very important to have those management decisions.
Ну и для того, чтобы это все функционировало, нужно принять целый ряд управленческих решений, потому что можно, что нельзя, коридоров, ядра. Ну и видите, что это работает.
And today in the second hour, when we have this practical work, the first assignment is related to on the basis of Korean land cover types. First, you should list what Korean land cover types are suitable for ecological network. And the second task is that you can use the categories or grades, which is the best one and which is still good one. You can use this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in weights.
Задание, которое мы будем делать сегодня, в занятии, оно будет связано как раз вот с землепользованием, с европейской базой данных и Калин по землепользованию. Нам необходимо будет посмотреть, какие есть землепользования, какое землепользование лучше подходит для создания там гидроаттрибутов, какое хуже, и ранжировать.
It will be just your expert opinion. All you are experts now already, and you can just think that maybe wetlands is very important, and maybe meadow is the less important, or maybe broadleaf forest is very important, and something else less important.
Понять роль экспертов, мы хотим определить, что лучше для экологической сети болота, луга, лесные экосистемы.
And we can look those ecological network map of different countries. At European level, the most famous countries are the Netherlands, Lithuania, Czech Republic, and Estonia, who were the first countries in Europe who designated green network through special planning procedure. And despite that, the Netherlands is quite urbanized country with very intensive agriculture, they have managed to designate quite many areas and potential areas for green network.
Вы видите, одна из трех стран, которая первой является лидером в области развития экологической сети и использования экологической сети пространственного планирования, это Голландия. Еще две страны, это Литва и Эстония, тоже лидеры. Ну, в Голландии, где людям негде жить, они смогли напрячься и создать такую неплохую сеть экологическую.
Yeah, if you compare the population density in the Netherlands and in Pskov Oblast, I don't know how many inhabitants per square kilometers are living in Pskov. Any idea?
20 maybe, somewhere around 15 or 20 times lower density.
Yeah. In the Netherlands there are 400 inhabitants per square kilometer, 400 in average. In Estonia we have average is 30, and if you exclude the urban areas then it's 7 persons per square kilometer in the rural areas. And just some examples, and today also there are several slides about history of green network. And originally the green network was first implemented in urban planning and later on at the state level planning in the United States. And this nice green network Florida is quite classical work.
Ну вот первая страна, которая занялась созданием экологических сетей для территориального планирования, это была США и вот Флорида.
And they called this Green Way. It was not the network, but a way, it's like the green roads, green way.
И назывались это не коридоры, а именно зеленые пути.
And a couple of years ago, we had a project financed by IUCN, and we developed the ecological network for all 3 Baltic countries, and we published the methodology in English. It was published, I think, 2001 or 2 already. And just maps of Latvia, you can see they paid special attention to the green corridors, and the same happened in Lithuania. Now they have a new one, but in this time it was like this. And you can look what is the situation closer to the border with Russia.
Пример очень грамотной, научно обоснованной, очень красивой сети сделаны для Латвии. Вот прямо на границе с Калужской областью.
And with different colors, ecological network always has hierarchical structure. There are some core areas which are important at international level. There are some core areas which are important at national level, and some core areas which are important at local level. And the same for the corridors, that there are corridors important at the international level, corridors important at national level and local level.
Видите, что элементы сети, да, они делятся на две категории важности, они важны на международном уровне, они региональном или национальном.
And the same for Lithuania. Again, you can see European ecological corridor, European core area, national core areas, national ecological corridors, and they also used this concept that there should be around core areas. There should every core area should have a buffer zone.
И, значит, здесь принципиальный момент, что они еще пришли к выводу, что необходимо создавать буферные зоны и зоны, ну, как бы они не обязательно должны связаны, но на которые можно остановиться и прыгнуть дальше.
And this is the example of Estonia. We already during Soviet time it was part of our planning system, and during the Soviet time we called this process to designate ecologically compensated areas. And nowadays according to the Act on Planning, we are using the term in green network. And at the national level, we just designated core areas, because practically 70% of our territory is suitable for green network.
Ну, вспомним принципиально такая ситуация, видите, что 70% территории можно охватить под экологическую сеть, поэтому они на самом уровне вот эти вот критерии утвердили только территории, которые важны на международном уровне.
And you can see that those dark green areas, they are core areas of internationally importance. And one criterion was that internationally important core areas should have the territory at least 100 square kilometers. And altogether we have 13 such kind of large natural areas still.
Ну, основной критерий для выделения международного был размер. То есть такое ядро должно иметь как минимум 100 километров квадратных площади.
Okay, then a few slides from history. Like I said, this concept was implemented and started at the United States already more than 100 years ago. And they used two words, greenways and parkways, in urban areas. If you have visited any large city in the United States, then you can see the structure of park areas. And many parks, they are connected by boulevards. And it's interesting, in the United States, landscape architectures were behind of this theory and implementation.
Тут видите, в 19 веке в Америке начали появляться эти коридоры, они назывались либо зеленые пути, либо парковые пути. Зеленые пути — это за пределами города, парковые пути — это в пределах города.
And also the concept of the green infrastructure was first used and implemented in the States.
И они же первыми ввели и начали употреблять концепцию зеленой инфраструктуры.
And it was just the interconnection or interconnected network of protected areas using the green infrastructure. And the same green infrastructure concept was implemented, or European Union started to implement this in 2007. We will look this later on. And then additionally to natural areas, those man-made elements were added.
Еврокомиссия в 2007 году пришла к использованию концепции инфраструктуры и, в отличие от США, где инфраструктуру принимается исключительно природные территории, Еврокомиссия добавила еще так называемые semi-natural, то есть полуприродные территории.
And just one example from this green ways or green ways in Boston, just green areas, and it's more than 100 years ago, and it's one of the classic. Then it's very important to emphasize that the purpose of Green Network is not only nature conservation or habitat conservation, that always when we are designating green areas, we're thinking at multifunctional level, and you can see that the most important aspects what should be considered in planning or designating green area is aesthetic, socioeconomic, educational, recreational, and then ecological.
Вы видите, что зеленые сети довольно функциональная вещь, это не только охрана биоразнообразия, но и куча еще разных аспектов, такие как эстетические, социально-экономические, социально-психологические, образовательные, educaционные и два типа экологических.
And also nowadays we are talking a new concept, healing landscapes, that you're going to the doctor and doctor don't give some pills to you, but just writing that you should spend 10 hours in this and this type of landscape.
Ну и еще один тип функции – это оздоровительная. Это вместо того, чтобы ходить в больнице и принимать лекарства, вы идете на природу, доктор прописывает прогулку в тот или иной ландшафт.
And it's already implemented in Australia and in New Zealand, such kind. And especially for the humans, I mean, very often people, they still don't understand the importance of nature, importance of biodiversity, but you can sell this concept using this landscape healing or recreational purposes. Just you can say that this element is very, very nice for hiking or canoeing, and at the same time you as expert know that it's also very good for the bird biodiversity, for example.
Людей не очень сильно волнует биоразнообразие, такие вещи, то, чтобы как-то понятнее людям стало, и чтобы интересы начали появляться, очень часто используется именно фокус на вот такие вещи, как оздоровление, рекреация, и как бы гораздо понятнее людям.
Then if you look this implementation of this concept in Soviet Union, I mean, then we should go back about 40 years. In Estonia, we first implemented this in late 60s and early 70s. And it's very important to emphasize that during the Soviet time, large cities, they had green belt around the cities. And the area of green belt depends from the number of inhabitants and from the type of industry inside the city. Then it was the purpose of civil protection, but this green belt was also used for recreational purposes.
Первое, что появилось в городском планировании, это понятие зеленого пояса. Зеленые пояса уже в некоторых европейских городах в 18-19 веке начали появляться. И это очень широко подход зеленого пояса использовался планирование, размер пояса этого зависел от размера города, его населения и других показателей.
And then in Estonia, we first implemented this concept at two cities, in Tartu and later on to the different parts of Estonia. We talked about functional zoning of territory, and the purpose of this green areas was nature protection and recreation. And it was the first green network, and so at time we used, like I said before, the concept ecologically compensative areas.
В 1983 году в Эстонии была разработана сеть компенсационных территорий, главная цель которой в сети была охрана природы и рекреация.
And it was very important that it was part of, in this time we called territorial planning. Nowadays we call it special planning, but it was one thematic layer of territorial planning at national level and at rayon level or regional level as well.
И как бы очень важная часть была территориального планирования. Необходимых слоев, которые участвуют в территориальном планировании, как на национальном, так и на районном уровне.
And now, since 1995, the concept of green network is part of Act on Planning. And according to the Act on Planning, we should designate the green network at the state level, at the county level or rayon level. We have 15 counties, and also at municipal level. In this time, we had more than 200 municipalities. A couple of years ago we had reform, and now we have approximately 70 municipalities.